Welcome to Even Just a Little, where we explore the beautiful gift of choice, tiny trusts toward big freedom, those moment to moment decisions we make that build life. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Even Just a Little, where we explore life through the lens of the beautiful gift of choice, tiny trusts that build our lives. And today, I am so grateful. I feel like this episode is going to offer so much practical help for those of us who have struggled with mental bumps in the road along the way. So, my guest is Krissie Glass, and Krissie is a licensed LPC, a licensed professional counselor. She is a certified trauma specialist. She's a speaker and she's written a beautiful book, and the name of it is Open Letter to Fellow Fighters, which I love because if you've had a bump with mental illness, you know what an uphill challenge it is. And that's really what this podcast is a lot about, making those tiny choices that can get us over that bump. But more about Krissie. She is married to Cameron, who's a longtime friend of mine, dear fellow. He leads a church in Fort Worth, Texas, a thriving church, and they have two precious twins, Joa and Selah, that are as children as full of joy as I've ever known. And I've known a lot of children. So you're in for a treat today. Welcome, Krissie. I'm so excited to talk with you.
No, thank you so much for having me. This is a joy for me. And I loved the intro. I love the concept of mental bumps. I think that's a great way to phrase it. And so many of us have experienced that, and it's very personal to us.
Yes, yes. Well, let's start. I forgot to mention that your day job is you work for a nonprofit
Mhm.
um, group that you minister to pastors. So tell us a little bit about that
Yes.
and the name of that.
It's Care for Pastors. We are a
For pastors.
nonprofit
Yes,
ministry,
yes.
and we serve pastoral families all throughout the US and honestly throughout the world. We offer resources, we offer individual counseling for the whole pastoral family. So the pastors, their spouses, their children, and I get to be a part of it. And it's a big part of my story, which I'm sure we'll talk through a little bit today. But I just love what I get to do because many people don't know that pastors' families struggle. And I think we're seeing it more often, and they need a safe place to get help as well, just like everybody. So that's what Care for
Mhm.
Pastors does.
And so you help people who help people all the time. You're
Yes.
supporting them because that is it's a big task to be to be in ministry. It's not just a Sunday morning wake up. And I used to
No.
remember thinking about that when I'd go to church when I was a little girl. I thought, man, this is the easiest job in the world. They just get up and tell us how to do it every Sunday, which we know that's just from
No,
from a 9-year-old's perspective, you know?
I know. I love the question. What do you do during the week when they ask my husband that question? I just laugh. We both just laugh, because we get to rest, we get to and then they preach on Sunday. But no, it is a lifestyle. It is working in the trenches with the people in our churches and community day in and day out. And it's a calling, and we absolutely love it. But you can get burnout, you can experience things, the struggles everybody else experiences, like mental bumps and different things, addictions and burnout, and just the stress of doing and helping people and doing ministry. So definitely need that safe place of encouragement and truth for our pastors and their families for sure,
Do
including our
you
family.
Yeah, don't we all? If we're
Mm-hmm.
honest, we all need help.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
meant to do this together. So Krissie, do you let's tell our listeners a little bit about your journey growing up. You have such an interesting childhood. I feel I'd love for you to bring the travel aspect into that because I think that's such a beautiful way that you traveled and got to see some beautiful things. But tell us
Mhm.
the how of how you got to where you are now. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Oh, goodness. I will
Start when
give
you were a
you
kid if you want. Yeah.
I'll give you a summary and some just really important, impactful parts of who made me who I am today. But I grew up in a pastor's home. Ironically, I'm still in ministry helping pastors now, but I was a pastor's kid. I still am a pastor's kid. And I grew up in a great family. I had a very good experience growing up in our church, and it opened up doors and opportunities to travel, like you had mentioned, and to really get to serve. And I, a big part of my life from a young age was getting to sing. My heart and my love was singing, and I knew that
Mm.
singing in church and singing for events and through school things, that that would be what God wanted for my life. And I also, like you said, got to travel and do mission trips through our church, which gave me a wider worldview and a better understanding of different cultures and people. But it also gave me a heart for people, just to serve them, to see their needs as well. So I was really what we call blessed growing up, in that I had a great family. I had all these amazing experiences, and from a young age knew that I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to pursue being a musician and a vocalist, and everything was kind of set for that path in my life. But it was when I was in college that I really experienced my first real struggle, and I guess real life event, I should say. And like I had said, I had a plan. I was going to grad school to pursue music. I wanted to do Broadway or some type of professional, be in the professional field, and that was my entire life was set up for that. And it was my last year of my undergrad being a vocal performance major that I was hit with the reality that our plans don't always work out, and that there are hardships and there is suffering that we do not expect. And I was told that I had to immediately have surgery. I had developed nodes in my throat that were suspicious looking, that looked like cancer. And the next day I would have to get them removed. And I remember thinking, wait, I had my whole life planned. I had this great childhood, and my dreams were really coming into fruition, only to see that everything was going to be taken away from me in that moment.
Mm.
And all my dreams, my goals, everything. And that's really when I saw, like, okay, this life is not my own. I had everything in place. I thought I had control over everything, but this health scare, I had no control over. And so they told me, you will have to have the surgery within 24 hours, and you will lose your voice with no possibility of singing. And if you're lucky, you'll be able to speak again. And
Wow.
I was in shock. And talk about emotions and not knowing how to navigate them. And
Yeah.
like I said, I grew up a believer. I was in church. My dad was a pastor, and I had my own personal faith in Jesus. And my whole world just imploded. Everything I knew and understood, because I'd lost everything overnight. And I was suffering and I was scared. And it was my first, like I said, real experience with all these emotions that I think we'll be talking more about today.
Yes.
But knowing that I may never get to speak again, much
Mm.
less, I mean, I will never get to sing again and do what I loved so dearly. And that realization was terrifying in my life, not knowing what my future would look like. And um, it's interesting because looking back now to that time in my life,
Mhm.
obviously I'm speaking, right? And thinking my life was over in that moment.
Mhm.
And I had no hope. But because of my faith in Jesus, because of my belief system, I knew I did. And I knew I had to wait and trust that God had a plan for my life. And it wasn't what I thought it would look like. And so It was about 3 months into my time of silence where I couldn't speak.
Hmm.
And I had a whiteboard that I would carry around.
Christy, I want to pick back up right here, but can you tell us some of the emotions that you did feel during that? Because up until that point, which I think I mean, this is the story with most of our lives. We think we have it, and not all, because some of us don't have great childhoods, but
Mhm.
at some point, there's something that happens and you think it's hopeless, or you realize this isn't going to go the way I thought it was going to go, maybe the way it's always gone. So
Yes.
I want to go back right to the whiteboard because I want to pick up
Mhm.
there. But can you tell us some of the emotions? And you've mentioned that in your family you were allowed to feel emotions and express
Mhm.
emotion. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yes, and I'm so thankful again for my family that we were to a fault maybe at times, we're a very emotional family. So
Yeah.
we had that landscape to just share openly what we were feeling, and that was good, especially when I had to face all of these unexpected and some emotions I'd never felt before. And a lot
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
those were fear and um, anger that I had done everything right in my head and everything was taken away from me, that I felt everything was taken away from me at the moment. Fear of not knowing my future and what in the world was I going to do with my life. And obviously, grief, just great
Mm,
grief of not understanding. Like,
yeah.
why me? I think many of us ask those questions, why me? And those emotions circled. But then I also had the emotions of hope. And there's got to be something here that I don't see, that I don't understand or grasp yet. And so those were dimmer than the others for a while. But
Sure. Oh, but that's just honest.
yes,
But that's probably a piece of how you were able to move forward by allowing yourself to at least experience these emotions. And it also seems like so many times as Christians, we have this mindset, if we do everything right, then it will all turn out the way I think it should. And that's just really not how this works. Do you think? I mean, and I'm grateful I learned that very young because I
mhm.
learned to lean on something divine love, God bigger than myself early on because I wasn't doing so hot without that. So go ahead though.
Well, yes, and our emotions can become our identity, right? They can become our focus of just like vocal performance was my identity. That's who I
Uh-huh.
was going to be. And it switched to I just focused on all these feelings that I was having, which they weren't bad feelings. They weren't misplaced feelings, but I didn't know how to develop them. I didn't know where to take them. I didn't know what to do with them except
Mhm.
to just carry them, and they were heavy. And like you had said, if we didn't have our faith, if we didn't know that there's a bigger God working outside of our purview and our own understanding, then I probably wouldn't know how to navigate those and I wouldn't have seen God work and be where I am now.
Okay, so let's go back to the whiteboard and take us there to how you landed as a therapist and a speaker and an
Yes.
author with your life
Yes.
revolving around sharing hope with
Mhm.
others. So
Yes, absolutely. And this was a pivotal time in my life. That's why I stayed on it a little, probably too long. But the
no.
whiteboard, that's how I communicated with people. Which have you tried writing quickly and all your thoughts on a whiteboard? No, no. And we didn't
Ah,
really we had texting, but it wasn't really as it doesn't look like it does now. And so that's how I communicated with people, how I related with others. So mostly I listened. And
that's so big though, Chrissy. You
that's
mostly
all
I
I could
listen.
do.
If when we
Yes.
listen, there's so much good to be heard if we really believe that, that goodness that and we're seeking that. So that period in your life, I can only imagine how you grew spiritually. May not
I
have
think
felt
I
like that at the time. Yeah.
not at the time. And that's usually true, right? In the time
Hmm.
we don't see the road forward, but we trust it's there. And just like with listening, I didn't really have a choice. I didn't have control, which was one of the best things for me. Because when you are a musician and you are in front of people, you turn on a switch and you have that control and you make sure to take it and you make sure to show it in how you perform. And that was my entire life, even as a pastor's kid, is to be able to control who I was in front of people.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
didn't have it. I didn't have it at all. So all I could do was listen to other people and sit back. And it's one of the most beautiful and will always be one of the most beautiful times in my life because I, for the first time, not by choice, but by gift, it was a gift. I got to hear other people's stories. I got to
Oh,
hear their hearts and their emotions. And I would just sit back and listen. And it was about 3 months that I just got to do that. I wasn't in front of people. I just got to be with people and I got to be a part of their lives. And like I said, what I thought was something that was taken from me was something that was actually given to me. And it was a far greater gift than I could have ever imagined. And one day I was out four wheeling with my mom, which wasn't a
that's
common
fun.
practice. I think we
That's
were,
really fun though. That's a really fun thought. Four-wheeling with your mom. I love that.
she was going to listen to this and be like, yeah, we sound cool. But we
Oh
weren't,
yeah, we
we
moms
weren't
do love
moms.
to sound cool, even really well, but yeah.
But we actually fell over on the four wheel, and I said, "Mom, are you okay?" And it was the first time that I spoke in over 3 months. And she
Oh,
looked at me as she was laying on the ground bleeding, but she looked at me and she said, "Krissie, your voice." And it was such a meaningful moment because I thought,
wow.
I have a voice again.
Oh,
And so, of course, went to the doctor to see, and they said, we did not expect this. Your vocal cords have healed miraculously, and we don't know about singing, but you can definitely obviously speak. And I remember thinking in that moment, I can speak, but I have gained this lost art of listening that I don't want to give up.
mm,
And that's really when God called me into the counseling field as
wow.
and it was like clear as day. I felt like the Lord just said, you know what it's like to hurt, but you know what it's like to heal.
Mm,
And you can share that with other people because you know there's a lot of hurting people who need people to
yeah.
listen to them, to care. I say to sit on the bench with them. The ministry of
Mm,
presence is huge. And that's when I knew that the course of my life would change, that my voice, that I didn't know if I'd have it back or not, would be used for something different. And that's what got me into the counseling field was that. And honestly, that time in my life helped me navigate my emotions and the things I would face in the future that would bring a lot of pain. But I knew I could heal and I knew what it was like to heal. And I wanted to share that hope with others.
mm. I
But
had
yeah.
no idea the listening piece of this. Well, no
Hmm.
wonder. I mean, just I mean, I've always been so drawn to you as an artist because we're both artists. Um,
Hmm.
but I mean, the more we listen to God, but to one another. That's what you do. You decided at a very young age, really, in the whole scheme of things,
Hmm.
to spend your life listening and offering hope and healing.
Hmm.
So I'd love to, at this point, maybe take off and to, we had talked about diving in and exploring primary and secondary emotions. So
Hmm.
when you went through this time, would you say your primary, and I wonder, and maybe we can address this a little bit too. I know my
Okay.
go-to when something happens to me, I'm sad. It takes
Yeah.
a lot to make me mad. That's just the way I'm
Hmm.
wired, but I can get sad like in a second. I can get sad, and then I can get sadder and sadder. That's my unhealthiness to keep going down the sad trail. But what primary emotion were you experiencing? And is it still the same during hard stuff?
Yeah, so I would say mine is sadness as well.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think maybe it's extremes, right? I think when we find ourselves to be joyful people, we experience the extreme at the same level, right?
Yes.
If we're not joyful, we feel that extreme grief or sadness.
True. Yes.
And it kind of, the pendulum swings back and forth to both extremes. And I would agree that mine is sadness as
Yeah.
well, and
Ooh,
just feeling that heaviness.
let's go with that then, Chrissy. That'd be a
Okay.
good place to start with the primary and maybe the swing, because the
Hmm.
more we can understand, and that's what I hope that our listeners will get from this, the more we can understand. The reason I wanted to dive into this was I think as a kid, I was taught that it was wrong to get mad. I was never taught it was wrong to be sad, but in my case, sad could become unhealthy. But I've
Hmm.
spent my whole life, not the last 15 years or so, but up until that point, thinking mad was bad. So
Hmm.
let's talk about the primary emotions and the swing, the opposite of that.
Hmm.
So there's a gift, the way we're all wired to use these emotions for our
Hmm.
good and the good of others. So let's start there.
Yes, and I think for anyone listening to this, right? Because this is obviously a conversation that we love to have with each other, and we grow from it, but we hope that people are listening to this and they're gaining knowledge and they're getting
Right.
encouragement and hopefully tools that help them with their
Absolutely.
experience where they're at. And I think everyone that is going to listen has a story and say, oh, I've had an experience in my life where I felt these extreme emotions and not
Mhm.
known what to do with them. And as a counselor, part of what I do, of course, my specialty is in behavioral therapy. Um, but with that, I get to study the brain science behind it and the neuroscience of how our brains are working, not just our experience and what we're feeling, and how we're displaying that, and how we live it out in our everyday life, but also what's happening in our brains and um, the biology behind it. It really is fascinating. And once we kind of have that better understanding of what are these emotions, where are they coming from, what in the world do I do with them, and how can I
Yes.
grow from them, I think that's a good place. Those are questions to ask as we're kind of talking about the primary and secondary emotions. And the primary ones, I had to revisit them because I was like, what are they? Because neuroscientists are just coming out more and more with new findings. And it's fascinating. Our brains are fascinating. And how science proves that scripture is right is also fascinating. But really, our primary emotions are sadness, anger, joy, and I'm missing one. Sadness, anger, joy, and there's one more, fear. And which is funny because fear is actually my biggest one that I experience.
Mm.
And out of those four primary emotions, we feel other emotions that develop our reactions to those emotions. So it's really important in counseling and with ourselves to say, okay, what, I can be feeling all these other emotions, but out of those four primary ones, where is it rooted? Where's it coming from? And through my experiences, I found, yes, sadness, but also fear has been a big driving force of a lot of ways I've experienced the things I've gone through in my life.
Okay, so we think we are able to recognize I'm afraid, fear, or
Mhm.
I'm angry, or I'm sad, or I'm joyful. So we're able to experience those things, but what we're hoping to dive into today is to help our listeners understand there's really something behind, something we want to look to the root of why
Mhm.
we're feeling those things. And that helps us
Yes.
understand and make a good choice here, because we're going to all experience emotions, but what we do with it is what we can control.
Yes, and I think the first place to start is that emotions aren't bad. Like you had mentioned, growing up,
Yes.
you learned that anger was bad, and that's kind of where I was getting at is I talk a lot about nature and nurture. A lot of who we are and our experiences are around just biology, the
Mm-hmm.
nature of who we are, but some of them are nurture, and they're the families we grew up in, the experiences we've had, and it's important to say like whether whatever your nature or nurture is, to know that emotions aren't bad and we each have them, and they're actually scriptural. They're all throughout scripture. We see that Jesus himself experienced these emotions. He experienced sadness, he experienced grief, he experienced anger. And emotions are not bad, they're not sinful, but like you said, it's what we do with them. And so it is important to say it's okay, I'm feeling this way. It's very important to say, why am I feeling this way? Where is it coming from? And if you don't mind, I'll go back to the
Please
very
do.
beginning of Genesis 1, and how we see Adam and Eve and being the creation of God, and when sin entered the world and they saw that they had sinned and they went and hid and they experienced shame. You see shame for the first time. You see guilt. You see fear. They hid from God. You see all these emotions that they're experiencing, and God comes to them and he says, "Where are you?" And then, and he said, "Well, why have you hidden yourself? Why have you clothed yourself?" And he says, "Who told you that?
Mm.
Who told you that you were naked? Who told you that these things were bad?" And I think we see it from the beginning of humanity that emotions are a real human experience, but we need to say, where did this come from? And who made us believe this? And what do we do with them? And
Where
so,
did
like,
this
we had,
come from? Where did this
Mhm.
come from? Yes. So
And
ask
who
that
told you that?
question when you feel an emotion, perhaps that you feel is uncomfortable, or where is this coming from?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's important. And it's like, okay, where did this belief come from? Who told you that? Was it someone else? Was it an experience in your childhood or a recent experience? Was it from someone else? Was it something you just started to believe about yourself that was true or not true? And these are inner conversations we need to be having with ourselves so we don't stay in a place of hurt. Like I said, that we heal and we grow from them. And so it's important to have the conversation. What's the primary emotion? How am I displaying this emotion? The secondary emotion, which can be shame and guilt. It can also be the positive, the other side of joy, but there's always that, it always comes from that primary emotion. And we need to kind of understand whether it be our experience or our upbringing or just like I said, our biology. We can discover where this comes from, but we can also figure out how to grow and how to filter it in a healthy way and not in an unhealthy way.
Let's go there.
Okay.
How can we filter it in a healthy way? That's what this show is all
Mhm.
about. There are lots of good choices to be made, no matter what's going on. So whatever you're feeling, there are some good practices. And maybe you could mention a few, and then we probably, oh yeah, we've filled up our 30 minutes pretty
I'm sorry.
easily. I suspected we would. I would just love to end with a little bit about the breath though. So experience the emotions, allow yourself to feel the emotion, but you don't have to stay stuck in it. You don't have to stay stuck in
Mhm.
it or go into a road of where it controls your thoughts. There are other choices. And I think that's where
Mhm.
you get into when you connect with that emotion and that thought, that's where it can become a bump. It can become one of the bumps.
Mhm.
And they can stick
Mhm.
around for a while if you don't learn have some healthy tools. So, Krissie, maybe just a few choices, tiny
Mhm.
trusts that offer people a way out of maybe what are uncomfortable emotions.
Yes, and a big conversational piece that I'm seeing more and more, especially on social media and in conversations with my clients in counseling, is the thought of rumination. Our prefrontal cortex is where we really operate day to day in how we live out our everyday life, how we make choices and decisions. And what we put here is so important. And what we ruminate on, what we focus on. And oftentimes we focus on the negatives or the stressors, those emotions
Mhm.
of how do we just survive?
Mhm.
And we ruminate on those. And the goal would be to what I call a reframe. Rumination isn't bad, but make sure you ruminate and you're focusing and you're thinking on things that are good, things that are pure and noble. Um, in neuroscience, we call it neuroplasticity, which you might be seeing around social media as well. But scripture tells us in Romans 12 that we can renew our minds daily. And what we focus on day to day and minute by minute and hour by hour, that is what we are going to choose to believe. That's going to dictate our day and how
Yes.
we feel and the choices we make. And it's important to ruminate and to think on things that are good, that are positive, and trusting that God renews our mind every day. And some tools are, if you go practical, some tools are the breathing, are the positive things throughout your day. Gratitude is a great tool. I call it Philippians 4. It when you really read through Philippians 4 and you practice that and put it into practice daily. And that's the faith aspect of trusting through prayer and through scripture reading that you are replacing those negative emotions with positive ones and truthful ones. But
Mhm.
let's say you're not a believer, you're not a Christian, and you're listening to this. We talked about practical tools like grounding and breathing and listening, and even music is a huge tool. Positive music that puts just those messages in your head that don't turn towards the negative and towards the mental bumps of feeling um, just down and depressed and giving into the anxiety, but giving into hope and joy and the good things and being outside and seeing the beauty, things like
Yeah.
that.
Beauty, yes. Well, that's really become my mission. I believe we highly undervalue the just the practice of putting good in. Just putting good in, whether it's beauty,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a walk outside. For me, creating art that also offers beauty or the breath or even focusing on moving the body. Good. If you're having a good thought, there can't be a bad one at the same time. It's
Mm-hmm.
there's only one thought at a time there. So the more good that can be put in, and there's so many good options. And breath, which we both know is not only it's a physical practice.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for you to explain, um, but we also see it as spiritual. I mean, God
Mm-hmm.
breathed breath. He breathed life into us. So the spirit
Yes.
aspect of breath. But let's don't even include that with this one.
Okay.
Let's just talk about explain. I know your breath is always with you. Your breath is
Mm-hmm.
always with you, and you can balance your parasympathetic nervous system by using the breath. Can you
Mm-hmm.
explain to us the science behind that, Krissie? Because I think just this little tidbit of conversation we have right here can change people's lives because your breath is always with you. It's free. If you struggle, this is something that you have it with you always. So I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
passionate about breath. So go ahead.
Well, and I have a very personal relationship with breath because especially when you are listening and you take out the distractions, breathing reminds you that you're alive.
Oh,
No matter what your background is, you have breath and it shows you that you are here for a reason. There's a reason you're breathing. And that's the deeper meaning behind breath is sometimes you just need to stop and hear yourself breathing to
yeah,
know you walk on this earth for a purpose and a reason. But no
yeah.
matter your foundational belief system, you are here and there's a reason you're here. And breath reminds you of that. And oftentimes, when I'm working with clients, especially those who experience panic attacks and anxiety attacks, breathing isn't just a form to calm yourself down. It's a physical aspect, because before it's emotional, it's physical. And so breathing brings oxygen to your brain. It lowers your heart rate. And yes, sometimes you feel so cheesy when you're like, okay, I'm going to breathe and count to 8 and then let it out. Like, you feel cheesy. And oftentimes people are like, I can't do this in school or at work, but it's not just a mental game or an emotional game. It is a physical truth that breathing brings oxygen to the brain. It lowers your nervous system, your heart rate, so that you can think clearer, so that you can get to a point of being more emotionally and mentally stable. There is a process there that's working. And it's funny, we all access breath. So it's something we can all access as a tool to help us
Yes.
calm,
Yeah.
and think clearer. So,
Yes. And that's such a gift that is available to everyone. If you're here, if you're here, you can access it. So,
yes.
yeah, well, that's this has been wonderful. I could talk to you for hours, honestly. We didn't get near as far as
Oh,
I hoped
no.
we would, so maybe we can do it again.
Yes.
Um,
So much to
but
talk about.
yes, well, truly, truly, maybe we can tackle the beauty aspect next time.
Okay.
Would love to do that. The music and the art, that would be fun. But um, I love to close with something personal, like perhaps because this really is about choice. We offered some tools, some choices that are accessible to everyone. But I like to close with, can you think of something that seemed insignificant at the time, but a tiny trust that you made that choice, and it really impacted the course of your life? What comes to mind?
Goodness. Well, something we didn't really even mention is there was another time in my life that just changed the course of who I am today. And I had lost my husband tragically to mental illness about 6 years ago. And that was a significant part of my life that I chose to trust God. And like I said, we could talk. And if this is too deep to add
No,
at the end,
how
I
did you
hope that's
do? No,
okay.
not at all, Chrissy. When you made that choice, what do you mean? Tell us what you mean. You chose to trust God that it was going to be okay, or
That
what
it
was
was
your?
going to be okay. That I often tell people nothing makes you value life quite like death. And I saw death firsthand, and I saw what mental illness does to people and the impact it has on people. But then I also saw that living was going to be the most important thing I did in my life. I had two 1-year-old twins. And anyone listening to this, another tool is, if you are hurting, if you are struggling, get help. You're not alone. And that is my life message, is when you think that life is over, that you'll never experiencing anything as difficult as what you're going through now, whatever it may be, that there is life ahead of you. And use that breathing to remind you of that, and there is hope ahead of you. And again, it's something big, but it was a life-changing moment in knowing the hardships that this world is going to bring and the brokenness that this world has, and how we are going to experience that in our own lives. But there is hope, and there is help, and there's healing, and that is what I want people to know.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you beyond for sharing your story, which is beautiful in so many ways, and for being willing to be so honest, because there's a vulnerability involved in that,
Mhm.
that it takes someone really brave to go where you've been and come out doing what you're doing. And I respect and admire what you do so much. So thank you.
Well, thank
Thank you so
you.
much for
Thank you so
joining
much.
us.
Thank you. No, thank you. And thank you for everyone who listens. And thank you, Sherri, for your vulnerability just to be willing to help other people. So
Love you, Chrissy. See you
love you.
soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks so much for joining us on Even Just a Little.